With a new season pass, there will always seemingly be a new tier 10 or rarely tier 9 premium within some version of the pass. And this time around, it's the tier 10 German premium tank destroyer, the Kanonenjagpanzer 3 GST Turm, which we're just going to call the GST from here on out. You get this one from the Ultimate Season Pass this time around, which is why Kone is able to review it within the first week rather than waiting. Yay! As usual, we begin by taking a look at the gun, and it's quite interesting. Remind you, this is a tier 10 tank destroyer with a 120mm armament. It deals 400 alpha damage every 9.8 seconds, meaning its base DPM is 2448, which is pretty bad for its tier, especially for its damage profile. I mean, that DPM value is on par with things like the Jaegeru and worse than the Ho-Ri and 183mm tanks as well. It's at least better than the 2684 and the Foch 155 actually using the 155mm on that tank, but that's not that hard of a bar to hit considering those are the lowest DPM tanks. But what makes those acceptable while this one is pretty rough? Their alpha damage. The tanks this one is hanging around in terms of DPM all hit harder than 650 damage. The Ho-Ri may feel slow, but it hits for 700. This tank nearly matches the Jaegeru, but that hits for 1050. It's better than the 2684 and the Foch, right? But those hit for 650 and 770 with a 3-round autoloader respectively. So the DPM on those tanks can be mitigated or at least helped by the fact that they hit really hard when they do fire. I usually don't bring up equipped stats in a review, but I must in this case, to tell you how those other tanks, when fully equipped, stray away from this tank's DPM massively. The GST gets to a measly 3108 DPM when fully equipped, with a commander running rapid loading and born leader, a gun rammer, vents, and food. That DPM is matched and beaten by things like the Turan and 268 when they're just stock. But a fully equipped Jaegeru gets over 3400 DPM, and the Ho-Ri gets over even 3600. Even the 2684 just barely edges this tank out when fully equipped with 3172 DPM. And it's because those tanks hit harder that makes this thing feel so out of place. And we're not even past its reload yet. This meta is all about quick games and big damage guns. So when it's hard to keep up DPM wise with a gun that hits for only 400, it can get pretty annoying real quickly. You shoot someone for 400 and before you can reload, they're dead. Meanwhile, being in any other tank mentioned here, you'd at least get a big hit on someone before the team finishes them off while you're reloading. Unless of course you get to solely farm said player, and even then your DPM takes you quite a while to do so. Moving on to its other gun characteristics doesn't help this tank's case either, as its pen is some of the lowest for tank destroyers with 265 standard AP penetration that flies at 1200 shell speed, and only 310 premium heat penetration with 1000 shell speed. Those speeds are nice at least and help with sniping, but 1000 shell speed is a pretty average bar to hit, so it's not something super special to set it apart. But with 310 heat pen, it just removes a bit of reliability that you get with 330mm of pen or higher heat that many tanks have at tier 10, especially even higher with tank destroyers. As for its handling, its accuracy is pretty decent at 0.36, and its aim time is pretty average at 2.5 seconds. It does have very good 10 degrees of gun depression, but it is a limited turret at 40 degrees to the left and right, which is a large range, but it still feels very limiting in cases, especially in close quarters combat. So how's its armor for those cases when you're put in them? Well, it was worrying to see full red in the article, because that's a big range that it could be. But now we see that it's just 250mm at a pretty flat angle for the turret. Which 250 sounds like a lot, but it can be easily penned with premium ammunition, and not just heat pramo either. The roof of this thing is only 20mm however, so if you're fighting this thing on a flat, and you get to see its roof, and you didn't load premium ammunition, well, just overmatch its roof with virtually any tank. The GST player can use their gun depression to their advantage to negate this weakness, but even at max gun depression, the face is still pretty pennable, although it will take more at a further back angle to do so. The turret is definitely the weakest part of the tank too, as the hull can be somewhat more reliable and trolly at times, with its equally thick 250mm plate being further angled back than the face, and at an angle downwards, so on a flat you're looking down at it, further enhancing its natural aim. So go for the face for more reliable shots. The same could be said for the side armor too. If this tank over angles, shoot at the upper structure of the rear, for the pens as the lower side besides the tracks, has space shielding and the tracks to get through, as well as these weird indentions in the side that create for harder angles, and even some additional 250mm walls and spots, adding up to 20mm side skirts, 20mm tracks, and 76mm sides in most places. It's 116mm of armor before angling is even taken into account. So aim high to just have to go through that 76mm on the upper top and skip the spaced armor entirely. If they are side scraping with this tank too, they may reveal another potential spot to shoot with this 130mm flat portion of the rear of the tank that may become visible when they turn their turret to look at you. Of course, this is all side armor shots, but even when side scraping, half the turret will be easily pennable with premium, or roof shots are still available as well. When playing this tank though and tanking hits, remember that you only have 1900 HP to play with, which can definitely go by quickly these days if you're not careful. Getting into position with this tank isn't hard to do with its speeds though. Something very good about this tank is how fast it can go. With a 68 km/h top speed and very good horsepower per ton with its 1100 horsepower, giving it a power to weight ratio of 22.37, these values are very good and there's no understating that. However, as usual with fast tank destroyers, they don't have the traverse speeds to keep those speeds when turning. And even stationary, the turn speed is only 24. You definitely don't want to be rushed in this tank with that limited turret arc and the low turn speeds on this thing. But you have very fast repositioning speed with that horsepower and top speed at the very least. And of course you can use that speed to constantly change sniping positions if you choose to not get in close. While sitting back you have 357 meters base steel concealment, which you can get down to 271 with a camo net and perks. And thankfully you have those 1000 plus shell speed rounds to do so, unlike many sub 1000 shell speed big TD guns that have a hard time sniping. You even have better heat speed than the Grill. On top of the shell speeds good enough to snipe with, and good camo and speeds to sit back and relocate with, you also have the seemingly new average of tier 10 tank destroyers view range of 390 meters, allowing for decent enough spotting capabilities for yourself in super tight situations. So what do I think of the GST? I think I have a somewhat avoidant feeling towards this tank, as its average and below average stats created for a pretty mediocre overall experience. It was said to be a mobile bunker on its release article and talked up its firepower, but those were all buzzwords to try and sell a tank that lacks a real identity, or at least an identifiable feature to me that distinguishes it enough from the rest and makes it feel good in any way. It's not got the pen of a tank destroyer, it's not got the armor of a bunker, unless the next buzzword spoken is to label every heat round as a bunker buster round. It's not got insane camo to make up for that fact, it's not got the DPM to keep up despite having the speeds to keep up, and even its speed isn't anything special with the bat and terrain existing, and they do it way better with fully traversable turrets, decent turn rates in comparison to this, and even camo to utilize, on top of a big gun or an autoloader that actually has better standard heat pen and damage than this tank's premium heat rounds. Even the AAT-60 can be brought up in this conversation as a better overall tier 10 than this thing. So, do I recommend this tank? Well, of course I do. Despite its lackluster characteristics and sometimes infuriating inability to do much in a game, it's ultimately super cheap for a season pass you were gonna buy anyway, right? If you're a super stickler on your gold count, then just buy the regular season pass and skip out on this one. But with this being such a cheap tier 10 handout like all the season pass tanks, you gotta remember this will probably get buffed in the future, so you might as well get it for cheap now rather than full price later. And if we're talking buffs, I may as well make my suggestion. Personally, I think this tank should have been a tier 9, but since we won't ever change a tank's tier again, I gotta make my changes based off of tier 10. And that means I think it should have overall better DPM and even 420 alpha damage. I think the 420 alpha changes fit the Germans more so than the American 120mm, and this tank could have used that extra punch on top of a full second reload buff, which would put its DPM at 2864, which would still be lower than things like the Sturv and the 263 by quite a bit. Also, potentially a 2100 hit point pool to allow its survivability to come from taking those hits rather than relying on misses, lucky bounces, or super passive play. You keep the under-reliable armor, you keep the camo, and most importantly, you keep the low pen. I think those drawbacks offer a unique challenge, but the DPM was the most frustrating drawback to me, as it didn't feel like I suffered because of my lack of skill, but instead suffered because this tank could just be easily punished by anybody that decided to just rush me, or I couldn't keep up with the team and everyone else's affinity to playing their high alpha tank destroyers. With alphas like 400 these days, you have to have the DPM to stay in those fights, especially if you're a big, limited turret traverse tank like this one. I'm hoping that Wargaming doesn't do anything too drastic to change this tank from what I see as a bottom of the barrel pick to a must-have top tier tank, but luckily since it's German they may just leave it alone, or take multiple years to bump it up just slightly. I will say I really hope they don't touch its roof like they did the IS-3 way back. Keeping it overmatchable for tanks without enough pen like the FE4-202 is just a good idea. But with that long analysis aside, let's get into the gameplay I have for you today. But first, my loadout. I ran a camo net on this tank to try my best at sitting back, but ultimately I think I would have been better off with optics with how I played this vehicle myself. And the rest was just a rammer and vents. My typical consumable loadout of a premium repair kit, food, and a premium med kit this time around. And with 45 rounds of ammunition, I split it between 20 standard, 20 heat, and 5 AG. As for the skills of my commander, I used my usual medium tank to tank destroyer setup of 6 Sense, rapid loading, steady aim, run-and gun snapshot born leader, situational awareness, camo expertise, and silent driving. Now let's get into that gameplay. And the game we got today is El Haluf. And yes, we did start a little bit into the match and I'm sitting here AFK, but that's because I did this live and had to reset my capture card for some stuttering issues. So I pressed the record button just as we got into this game, and luckily I did because this ended up being the one to showcase on the review. Now, El Haluf is one of my favorite maps in the game, and I think it's just because it's overall pretty balanced and pretty fun. And like I said with my setup, I could have utilized optics more so because of the way I play this tank, and immediately you see here that I'm going sort of brawling, right? I could sit back and snipe, but with no light tanks I didn't want to sit there and wait all day. Plus we have plenty of people already sitting back. Since I have good speeds and I have 10 degrees of gun depression, I thought, let me get into this position and see just how much I can use my armor in any way. And look how quickly we got here. Even though we started late, we were the first one to get here, right? And in a position like this, even with DPM, if the enemy doesn't push me, if they stay in front of me, I get to pull back from the ridge, pull forward when I'm ready, and we'll be fine. Hopefully, right? That's what I'm hoping. Now, I only played 28 games in this tank, and it felt like I played a lot more with how abysmal it felt. We averaged 3,000 damage per game, and that was between getting multiple 4K games and 2K games. Because the average experience for this thing, honestly, was... And I can't tell if it's because it's the beginning of a season. Usually those are pretty weird games. But like I said in the review, it's either I shoot at a tank once, deal 400 damage to it, and then it implodes in front of me due to everyone else blasting away at it. Or not even everyone else, just one or two other tanks being big alpha guns deleting it, right? Or you had games where I tried to sit back with my camo net and was left behind. Despite having good speeds, you still have to catch up with the team, and then when you do catch up, that's when you get those instances mostly of I put one round into them, that's 400 damage, and then they're dead, right? Because at that point, if you're sitting back as a tank destroyer and it's time to move forward, it means your team's winning. Now, already in this position, I've done 2,200 damage. We've shot the UDES, the Sturm Tiger pushed in, little Ariette's kind of messing with us. That UDES, I put another round into him, I'm leaving him on a one-shot. T-30 actually bounces me. Huge. The Ariette bounced us, so we have 990 block damage. Lower tiers, if they're not loading their premium, and on an Ariette, I mean, you know, who expects him to load his premium first? Unless you're going to shoot heat. Like, you do have somewhat reliable armor against low tiers. But even low tiers can easily pen you if they just load the premium. And for a tank that I'm going to review later on this month, the Roswell, 276 premium APCR penetration was enough to get through this tank. At least I think it's 276. Through this thing's face. And that thing, funny enough, gets better DPM when fully equipped in this thing. Also was buffed to 420 alpha. Anyway, before we turn this into a Roswell review, we've done 3,500 damage in 4 minutes. So this already was looking to be one of my better games because I'm full health still and there's plenty of stuff to do, and there's artillery who's just going to give us some free shots here. Is he going to give us another one by just standing there? I'll take a hit from a batch head artillery. Luckily, he hits my gun, so he doesn't splash anywhere on my vehicle. And now we're up to 4,300 damage. But because of artillery 2.0, well, artillery gets to stay alive. That's cool. That's neat, isn't it? So this is your usual beginning fight in this kind of position on El Haluf. You either get to do a lot of damage, or you get pushed quickly. Now, that Death Star luckily gets to cross. I was really he was the one I was worried about most. 310 standard AP is the same as my heat, and he could really mess me up. But I notice on the minimap, perks of using the square minimap, that a tank destroyer's little dudes under my teammates' noses. So I thought, let me turn around and I'll get some shots into him. Luckily I do, but this Udez, he is now scaring me the most, because before we were kind of on the same flat and he would give me his lower plate. Now he can use his siege mode against me, and I have to hope and pray that I pen his cupola if I shoot him. I am in a platoon, so I'm communicating with Soda, asking, I hope you're looking this way, and if this Udez pushes me, you have shots. He's in a bat, though, so I have to rely on 500 shell speed to get to me. This AMBT just pokes and pens my front. I don't bother to check if it was my turret or my lower plate, but I'm guessing it's my turret, because it would have been harder for him to pen my lower plate. Udez does poke, bounces or misses me or something, and then continues to pull forward, and luckily Soda does take him out. Thank goodness. And now we're at 6,300 damage, and at this point I'm thinking, this is the best game I've had so far. I still have 800 hit points and it's 7 versus 7. But guess what? With 849 hit points and a Turan still alive, I could very well be taken out of this game within one shot. So I still have to kind of play a little bit passive and not push this AMBT. As much as I want to, it's not a good idea with the Turan quite literally being on the A line somewhere. So I'm waiting for the Turan to poke the corner. I'm waiting for the enemy to make the play, because there's no point in taking my limited turret traverse tank into enemy territory. Now this Foch is still alive, and I'm going to put him down to a one-shot, and then my other platoon mate, Oak, is going to take him out. Cool. Thank you, Foch, for giving me quite a bit of free damage, I would say. And now it's a 6 versus 5. My 120mm that just got buffed decided to rush in, and he dies to the Turan. IS-7 pokes the corner, aim for his upper plate, but somehow hit his lower with my heat round. Doesn't matter, got a pen, that's what we take. And then we bounce his upper plate with that heat round. Now, the Turan is pushing my tank destroyer, who I want to keep alive because he's my only friend over here, but already pokes the corner. And so, instead of poking forward to kill the Turan, I instead poke forward just enough to kill the artillery. In hindsight, I should have probably killed the Turan, because the Turan ends up getting away. Again, he's too scary for me to do much about. I focus the more HP instead of focusing the deadlier target. Don't make those mistakes, but hopefully I don't regret that decision, right? But we're at 7,600 damage now. 500 spotting from that Udez and that AMBT, thanks to my platoon mate. Thank you very much to Soda, who doesn't have enough HP to come over here and kill the Turan for me. I was thinking if he's full health, come over here and get this guy. We bounced the ass end of an IS-7, so that's 2 unlucky bounces now towards the IS-7. And then we do a little server jitter there. Just a little bit of a lag. And now we're getting shot in the ass, which was really scary to me. I was hoping the Turan was going to poke there before I had to back up. But this Borsig, well, he got revenge for the Foch, I suppose. But I'm going to wait for him to die before I poke him, because I don't want to get spotted, and then he, despite being right next to my platoon mates, he looks at me. Again, another little server jitter, and that's been happening all week for me personally, and to many others in the chat, so I don't think it's a me issue, so to speak. The Borsig is now dead, though, so now I take this opportunity to turn around and try and go for that, but my platoon mates are too good. Got rid of the Pershing, got rid of the Borsig. We know where the other two guys are, right? But the thing is, we saw the IS-7 running across to the right, and we haven't seen him cross back yet. So, and the Turan may have crossed right, but he didn't. So, we know where the Turan is. I'm waiting to push the Turan until I see where the IS-7 is. Because I don't want to get crossfired. Because now I'm one shot to the IS-7 after getting hit by that Borsig. So, and now we know where the IS-7 was. So not only was I scared of getting one shot by the Turan, now I have to worry about getting one shot by the IS-7. But since they're both playing back to back with each other, I'm going to just pressure the corner. We're both one shot to each other. He may hit harder than me and have better penetration, but he's a Turan. And we're just gonna dead stare at each other. Wait for one of us to make the play, one of us to make the move. I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna wait for my platoon mates to catch up to me. But my Sturm Tiger P has a lot of HP, and he makes the push. And what do we see? Well, we see the turret of the Turan turn around. He gets picked off by the Sturm Tiger. Now, we're not going to bounce our heat rounds off of the ass of the IS-7. We have one heat round left. Easily should be able to put it in. And boom. Picks up our second kill. Puts us at 81-17 damage. 15-17 base XP. Which for tier 10, to me, usually means an ace tanker. But as it's a new tank, you know it's not. It was really exciting to me to finally get a game that showcased at least some capabilities of this tank's speed and a little bit of its armor prowess that gave us the edge in being able to do what we did in this match. Instead of what I found to be my usual games of sitting back, using pretty abysmal DPM to snipe, and then being forced to either retreat from a loss or push forward from a win and still not be able to pick up a lot of damage from the cleanup, as again you only do 400 damage, and if you're in a cleanup stage, well, there's plenty of tanks that go just as fast and hit just as hard or have autoloaders or, you know, do things way better, especially fully traversable turrets. I don't want to say that this tank is god-awful, but it's definitely one that requires a lot more restraint from the user than many others, where you can confidently make plays. I just never felt confident making plays with the DPM and the armor of this tank, especially close quarters plays that were always just never in your favor. With a tank like this, you are definitely hoping for certain maps. You definitely want your procs, you definitely want your Westfields, and even maps like that where there's a strong hold down position that you can rush to with your speed and your gun depression that has at least some protection through either teammates or just good map positioning. But for the most part, the rest of your games are going to be quite passive in the back or too quick for you to keep up. And so, to me, it was just a pretty mediocre overall experience that I didn't really enjoy too much, but I was happy to have this game. With that, though, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.